Check, check. I'm on live. It's a little late in the evening for me. Brain no worky, but I'm going to try it anyway because you know how I am. I miss you guys too much when I don't come on live. So I had one of those days where I just had to take care of a bunch of stuff. And so I'm coming on live before I feel ready. Look at how my shirt's like all crazy. It's not that it's crazy. It's just that that's what the freaking screen does. I'm not kidding you. It's an optical illusion. I'm an optical illusion. So I don't have anybody in the house yet, but let me. Dang it. Let me move that. That's much better. I like that cobalt blue. And let's see. Thumb up, please, if you don't mind. So, one of my problems of why I was having trouble coming on, and I am going to continue to have trouble coming on, even though I'm on, is that I can't find my freaking cell phone. So, this is going to be quite the disaster. And, you know, it's not going to be a disaster. It's going to be fine. I know that I'm so freaking dependent on my cell phone when I'm on my lives. It's like my crutch. It kind of drives me nuts. I don't know if it drives my viewers nuts or not, but it wandered off. I was doing stuff. I had it and it wandered off. So I looked everywhere. There's no one in the house that can call it for me. So those damn phones, they're so skinny and slippery. They go wherever they want, don't they? It's like they have legs. And then when I find it, I usually find it like in the dumbest place, like some random shelf. Like, WTF was I thinking, right? Okay. So make sure that you're still subscribed in the event that you are subscribed. And I don't even think you can see the S on there. How are you going to know what to do if we don't fix that? There we go. Is that better? I think that might be better. Subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed. Or if you're not subscribed, I would appreciate a sub so very much. Each and every one counts. I have a couple of dear friends that are content creators on the tube as well, and I have watched their channels grow from like pretty much when they were brand new to exploding. And it's very cool. It's super cool. So I don't know. I don't know that, I kind of exploded early and then flatlined. So I don't know. I mean, I'm very grateful that I have a channel. I always want to reiterate that. And, I'm always looking on the plus side. Like, I don't get so many trolls. There's no trolls in here yet, and no friends either. Oh no. But my people don't expect me to be coming on so late at night. It is July 9th and it's Wednesday. It's 8:41 in the evening, East Coast time. I didn't do my whole thing. Share a video of mine with somebody that you think might like my channel and, share it in a Facebook group, something like that, that's covering the same kind of topic. So I wanted to talk today about these terrible things that I've been talking about the last few videos. There's so much crap going on. My heart is in Texas with the flood victims. And there's other floods going on other places. And of course, I've just as much compassion for those folks. Like New Mexico, I know, I'm not so sure. There was like a tornado warning in Maryland. I mean, these weather tragedies are becoming more and more common. But, I don't want to talk about global warming. I don't want to talk about cloud seeding. I want to talk about the freaking Epstein files because I guess Jeff's brother, Mark, spoke out, and I was going to read you something, and I didn't print it. So I was going to read it off my cell phone, but since I don't have my cell phone, I was going to try something new. I have it on my laptop that I'm recording on, and I have it on a different tab. So I was going to try switching tabs and reading it to you while I'm live. So it's going to be a little science experiment. My whole channel is a science experiment. Um, Turn on your notification bell to ring so you know that I'm coming on live or when I've just dropped a new video or a new post or something. Everything I say is simply my opinion for the sake of hoping to start a conversation and open up a discussion and learn something. My aim is always to be educational, and all my videos are made for YouTube, and it's an infotainment platform. So there you have it. Yeah, there's so much crazy going on. How do we keep up? You know, flooding the zone is what the gaslighters do. And then we have these severe floods, and we've got little kids that are still missing. The last I checked, it was five very young children, ages 8 or 9, it seems. Going over the timeline and the details of what unfolded on the 4th of July there in Kerr County, Kerrville, Texas, and along the Guadalupe River, and especially at that Camp Mystic, or I'm sorry, I think it's Mystic Camp is actually what it's called. Going over some of the details is not to point the finger, and it's not to lay blame. It's to try to understand and learn from it and move forward. But I want to be very careful in what I say, because I learned something just like an hour ago, and I looked into it. So I cross-referenced it to make sure that it was a good piece of information, but it's really messed up. Have you guys heard that one of the first responders called into his dispatch, I think it was a police officer, and asked for the code red emergency alert to be set off? I guess it's like a siren and then the cell phone and a bunch of things. I don't really know what all it entails, but the dispatcher said, I can't do that. I can't set it off without having a supervisor's approval. And it did not go off until 10 in the morning on the 4th of July. And I think that the first responder made the phone call at about 4 in the morning. And it's not the whole area that didn't have their code red. I wrote it down so I'd get it right. Code red emergency alert is technically what it's called. Code red emergency alert. Other places nearby had theirs go off. So it's real specific to right there. I think Kerrville, Kerr County. And where Camp Mystic is. So it's just unbelievable. I mean, anybody that lives there, has relatives there, anybody that's directly affected, you know, we're all praying for you, right? We are all praying for you. And what needs to be done, people tend to have that fight, flight, or freeze response when they're in a dangerous situation, a crisis. So people that freeze obviously aren't going to be the people that are appropriate to be first responders. People who do the fight or flight are potential good candidates for first responders. Some of us, and I'm not saying that I'm a good first responder, because I'm not so sure that I am, but I'm married to one. But I do know that in a crisis situation, in an emergency situation, I do well under stress. So when you're in a situation like that and you just have to be hyper organized and focused in what you're doing. And if you don't have that capacity, if you just draw a blank, then obviously you're not going to want to be a first responder. Um, I think some people might find themselves in the position of being a first responder and then having that happen in certain situations and not knowing. I've known of a few myself that have then put in their resignation right after learning that about themselves. Some things you just don't know until you're there. So, for instance, I never would have thought that I would have been a good crisis intervention counselor doing the assessment and referrals. And I really liked it. I really liked knowing the law. I really liked helping people and applying the law and protecting people's freedoms, but most of all, protecting their safety. Any of these jobs, like um, rescue squads, search and recovery operations, law enforcement, fire and rescue, medical. Now I forget what I was going to say. There we go. It's too late. I need more coffee. Um, yeah, I mean, these are heroes. These are super, what I call rescue heroes. But what I was saying about not knowing if you're cut out for it or not. I had no idea that I would be cut out for like working in a psychiatric facility. I didn't think I would enjoy that, and I didn't think I was cut out for it, but I did. I performed well under stress, and you have to have good instinct, good intuition, good communication skills. You have to trust yourself. You have to trust the people around you, like your other coworkers. You have to have very clear communication if you're in a life and death situation. And in a psychiatric facility, in a locked psych ward, you're in a life and death situation at times. So you have to do a lot of training and you have to always be ready. Because people lose their crap, and they might get a hold of a pair of scissors or something. Like, I mean, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And if you're not organized as a group and as an individual, it's not going to pan out well. So remove yourself from the situation. But what I was going to say too is about my husband. Like, he had no idea he was cut out for law enforcement and being a first responder. He was a biologist and he wanted to be an enforcement officer, kind of like, what Yogi Bear did for a living. So he grew up with his sights set on that in Washington State, wanting to work for the Department of Fish and Wildlife as an enforcement officer, basically a park ranger. And he studied science and he worked as a park aide, and he applied for the job a bunch of times, and they kept telling him he needed more law enforcement experience. So he kept getting more law enforcement experience, finally to the point that he started doing the he was a volunteer officer as a rookie out in Arlington, Washington, before we moved back to Ohio 15 years ago. And he had his 40-hour work week with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. He was a biologist, and then the enforcement officers worked, in the next office. And he worked his 40-hour work weeks, kind of banking hours, Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, like all night, Friday night and Saturday night, he started pulling in 20 hours of volunteer time and working as a volunteer police officer. And he fell in love with it. And the people that ran that office were very excited to have him join them as he was beefing up his law enforcement skills. And sadly for them, they missed their opportunity because he realized that he had quite a passion for law enforcement and that he really didn't want to do all the data for the state. So he, to do that enforcement position, for parks and recreation or for natural resources, you have to be like half law enforcement and half biologist. And he's still a biologist in his mind, but he really loves being a first responder, so much so that when he's not on duty with his paid work as law enforcement, he volunteers with the rescue squad. So he's also a firefighter and an EMT. And he does really well. He does much better than me in situations that you need to keep your cool when things are not good. So happy to have him as my baby daddy. We have 4 kids, and he's always been great in bad crisis situations. So, I'm just really devastated for the folks there in Texas. Those numbers have climbed, I think, over 110 now for fatalities. And I think it's getting close to 180 now of people that are missing. So it was only yesterday that they all of a sudden came up with this huge number of like 160, 170 people that were missing. Prior to that, it was like 20, and then it went down to like 11, right? They had when it was 20, it was I think even when it was 20, that it was all of the 3rd grade campers that were 8 and 9 years old and one of the camp counselors that were unaccounted for. And then they recovered 10 of the children. I don't think any of them survived. I hope I'm incorrect, but I've been paying very close attention. And so then they still had 10 little ones missing. This was like maybe yesterday. And they still had the one camp counselor missing. And then today, I think they've said that they've brought that number down for the campers down to 5. So 5 campers, and still the camp counselor, I think, is missing. But then they've got this huge number that kind of came out of left field. I was expecting it. I had said something on one of my lives a day or 2 ago that there's going to be like whole families that were camping that probably perished, all of them together, like in their RV or tent camping. My goodness. And there just wasn't, there was just massive failures everywhere. And then it's an act of God. That's why I think it's really important to pay attention to that. There's a lot of conspiracy theorists talking about, Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about how she's going to put in jail anybody who seeds clouds and things like this. Cloud seeding is real. It's not a conspiracy theory. My sister lives in Florida, and they have hurricanes all the time, and they pretty much routinely always seed the clouds. You can look it up. You can Google it. I think it's been happening since the 60s. And I Googled it to double check, triple check. But I think it's like iodine. Silver iodine is one of the things that they use primarily to seed the cloud, which means they fly in there with their airplane into the eye of the hurricane, and they drop these silver iodine things in the eye of the hurricane. And it's supposed to create more precipitation or to create it to come sooner, but it doesn't have that much of an impact. I think that from what I read, the studies indicate that it's like a 20% increase. So you can increase the amount of water or snow. I guess they do it in ski areas too. So, so it gives them some control over the precipitation Did I say that right? Precipitation. And as far as with hurricanes, they can try to make it so that it doesn't drop as much water in the more populous areas. They can try, but it's weather. So I don't think it's an exact science. I'm pretty sure that there's not the tightest reins on the control. But I would think that the only people that have the ability to do that, the authority to do that, the technology, and the instruments to do that would be government officials, I would think. I can't imagine like people going rogue, seeding clouds. Come on. And that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to make it sound like. She's like, I'm going to make these new laws to put people in jail. Really, she's not even doing the dog whistle thing. She's just indicating that she's blaming certain people, the the radical left lunatics, is that what they're called? But it makes her seem completely nuts, in my opinion. It makes her seem completely nuts. But then I find myself thinking, like, why is she coming out swinging like that? Like, she probably knows that she sounds nuts, right? And the gaslighters always play the victim, always. So it just, I'm going to say it just made me wonder if she's not being proactive, trying to lay blame somewhere else. I don't know what the cloud seeding situation was with those the rains that caused those rivers to flood like that. The area where that is, I was speaking about this the other day. It's very much like the Appalachians, where it's hill country. It's just like rolling hills, just one after another, after another, after another. And it's a very dangerous area for flash floods. There's not a lot of topography on our planet that's like that. I think it's real specific to that area of Texas and part of the Appalachians, maybe part in Kentucky, and then maybe um, North Carolina or West Virginia. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a hill country expert, but yeah, it sounds like it's pretty rare globally. I'll put a link in the description to a scientific um, geologist who explained it really well. And I watched it a few days ago and I talked about it and I linked it up in my description of my video the day before yesterday. But now it's been a couple of days, so I'm not as sharp in thinking about it. And especially because it's 9 o'clock at night and I don't have anybody saying hi. Thank you for being here, whether you're on the replay crew or here live. If you want to say hi, then I'll know that you can hear me. And if you can't or don't want to, I'm not trying to pressure you. I'm just inviting you. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and look into my notes here. Man, these people, Peter Thiel. Let's just talk about for a moment the jump in the tape. So are you anybody who's following the Jeffrey Epstein crapola? Today's Wednesday, and on Sunday there was that big announcement from the DOJ that um, there's no client list from Jeffrey Epstein. There's no evidence that he is it called Mohad or something like that? It's like the equivalent of the FBI for Israel. No evidence of that. Zero evidence that he ever had any intentions of blackmailing anybody, since he didn't even keep track of his clients. And I guess he didn't have any clients as far as we know. If there's no list, then there's no evidence, right? So, yeah. And then there was the one final thing is that he definitely absolutely did this to himself, right? So now I'm going to try to read this article on a different screen while I'm live. So it's probably going to change the lighting because it's probably going to be very bright. So I won't be able to tell because I can't see that screen. I'm just going to read you this article about Epstein's brother. So it says Jeffrey Epstein's brother said he laughed at how stupid the Trump administration's handling of the Epstein files has been, and revealed he doesn't believe their assertion that the financier's death was a suicide. The notorious pedophile's brother, Mark, told News Nation's Chris Como, you know how I feel about News Nation. I do like Chris Como. He is kind of like Brian Enton. Those two have the most integrity from what I can tell, in my opinion. So he was interviewed by Chris Como on Tuesday, and that he was not convinced by the White House's memo this week that said there is no evidence Epstein was red-rummed or kept a long suspected quote-unquote client list. So here's in quotes, every time they say something or do something to try to quash the fact that he was most likely red-rummed, they just put their foot further down their mouths, Mark Epstein said. He particularly singled out FBI Director Kash Patel, my favorite, for his role in the Epstein files release, noting how he U-turned from an ardent skeptic over Little E's death to now insisting that there was no cover-up. Mark pointed to Patel's citing of his career as a prosecutor when he said that, quote, you know a suicide when you see it, end quote, despite Patel having no medical degree or qualifications as a forensic pathologist. The question that popped into my mind was, first of all, and I will link this article up in the description, of course, how many suicides has he seen? Is he a forensic pathologist? Does he have a medical degree? Mark questioned. Quote, does he have a certificate that he passed a CPR course? Does he have a Boy Scout merit badge for first aid? What is he basing his expertise on? End quote. Mark said that Patel's assertion over Little E's death in 2019 contradicts what Kristen Roman, a medical examiner for New York City, who conducted the autopsy on Epstein, said at the time. Quote, she came out of the autopsy and said she couldn't call it a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide, end quote, he claimed. Dr. Michael Baden, who was hired by Mark Epstein at the time to be present at the autopsy, said at the time that Epstein suffered injuries that were more consistent with a homicide than a suicide. He said Epstein had small burst capillaries in his face, mouth, and eyes, and also had 3 distinct fractures on his jaw. Quote, I have never seen 3 fractures like this in a suicidal hanging, end quote, he said, per CBS News. Mark Epstein noted on News Nation on Tuesday, quote, Baden, who was there on my behalf, who witnessed the autopsy, also concurred that it looked more like a homicide than a suicide, end quote. And this is in quotes. Now, was Kash Patel in that autopsy room? No, end quote. He continued. Quote, was Kash Patel in the prison when they found Jeffrey? No, I don't think so. And if he was there, that raises an even bigger question, end quote. Yeah, these people are just like painting themselves into a corner. in my opinion. The brother of the infamous financier is not alone in doubting the White House's stance on Epstein's death, with former Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson also wading into the controversy on Tuesday. Yeah, and I mean, Tucker Carlson is a wingnut, in my opinion. It's pretty wild to see all of these far right Trumpster Fire supporters going against him now, basically. And Carlson is one of them. So Carlson said he believes the government is, quote, covering up, end quote, the Epstein files to protect U.S. and Israeli intelligence services, and said it was, quote, obvious that Bondi was, quote, covering up crimes, end quote. Amid mounting scrutiny over Trump's handling of the scandal, Carlson said he is not convinced that the president was covering his own alleged ties to Epstein and felt the reason is hinged on espionage. I'm going to read that one again. Amid mounting scrutiny over Trump's handling of the scandal, Carlson said he is not convinced that the president was covering his own alleged ties to Epstein and felt the reason is hinged on espionage. Quote, I don't think he's that guy, actually, end quote, Carlson said of Trump. Quote, I don't think he likes creepy sex stuff, end quote. It's a really bizarre thing to say, and how in the world would Tucker Carlson know? And isn't Tucker Carlson the guy who hated the Trumpster Fire, and then he was fired from the mainstream network that he worked for? Was it Fox? And then when he was fired, he became a right wing all in, like he just did a 180. And Trumpster Fire was fine with that, even though he had been like a never Trumper, just like Vance was a never Trumper a year ago. And now he's the vice president of the Trumpster Fire. So, rather, Carlson floated a more sinister plot to protect the U.S. and Israel intelligence agencies that was driving Trump's response. Quote, the only other explanation that I can think of is that the intel services are at the very center of the story, U.S. and Israeli, and they're being protected, end quote, he said. The issue of Trump's handling of the Epstein files led the president to snap at a reporter on Tuesday when they asked Bondi about the Justice Department's internal review of the documents. Trump brushed off fury from his MAGA base. Trump brushed off fury from his MAGA base over the abrupt conclusion of the Epstein probe this week and accused the reporter who quizzed Bondi of desecrating the deadly Texas flood tragedy. I wanted to talk about that. How he used that as he was like weaponizing it. And yeah, let me just finish this. I think this is the end of the article. Quote, are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? End quote. Trump lamented to reporters present for his 6-month cabinet meeting. Quote, this guy's been talked about for years, end quote. One sec. Yeah, and then out of the blue, yeah, that is the end of the article. Out of the blue, oh, here, let me go back over there. Hello. Wow, still no comments in the chat. I wonder if I messed up the way I've done that once or twice before where I've made it so that people can't comment, but I did that accidentally. So if I did that, I'm sorry. And going back over to the article with the that last quote from the Trumpster Fire, this guy's been talked about for years. Yeah, he passed away 6 years ago. But suddenly, out of the blue, on Sunday, the DOJ made this crazy, in my opinion, crazy statement about the Epstein files that they've been talking about for so long actually are non-existent. Oh, and those thousands of videos with all the victims, that was just child porn. That wasn't Epstein doing those things. It's like, no, we know that he videotaped everything. We know he had, and I mean, it's not like just child porn. I mean, come on. If you've got thousands of videos of child porn, don't you think that you should be on that and getting um, the victims in those videos protected and figuring out who's making the money off those videos, who made the videos, who's marketing the videos? I mean, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. That network. Anybody who is into that kind of thing is part of this network, I guess. Like Thailand, it's not even illegal. So it's usually those types of people that have those interests like to hang out in Thailand. And a lot of lawyers that have those interests like to hang out in Thailand and try to um, create laws that will protect perverts like them. So yeah, the assertion that anybody asking a question about the Epstein files 3 days after the DOJ, or not even 3 days, 2 days after the DOJ comes out of left field with that. And then I think the way he said it was, the reporter asked Bondi a question. Bondi was about to answer. She started answering. Trump interrupted and said, wait. Hold up. You still talking about this guy? This creep? That was years ago. He's been talked about for years. We've got all these great successes going on. We've got the tragedy in Texas and all the things. That's not a direct quote, but it's about as good as I could do. Many great successes, tragedy in Texas, and all the things. We have all the things. And you want to talk about this guy? Okay, fine. And then Bondi went on to answer the question and just sound like a lunatic. So they released the video of a surveillance tape from the prison, and there's like an entire minute missing, an entire 60 seconds. I think that the time that's missing is from the 11 o'clock and 59 minutes, like right before midnight until midnight. And so it's 60 seconds that's not in the video. And Bondi had this great explanation, but she was kind of talking too much. It's like, if that's really the explanation, just say it. You don't have to like spin in circles and keep saying it. But it makes it a little less believable. But either way, hear me out, that if it wasn't clipped, like she's saying that every night at 11:59 there's 60 seconds where there's like that glitch in the system and there's no footage for 60 seconds from 11:59 to 12 midnight, which that doesn't mean that nothing could have been done in the missing minute. That means that anybody who knows that system would know that if they were going to be trying to do something undetected, that would be the time to strike, right? At exactly 11:59, you'd have exactly 60 seconds to do whatever you wanted and have it not be video recorded. So either way, whether it's been clipped or whether that's true and accurate, that the tape, that the surveillance system does that every day, either way, it doesn't clear anybody, right, from any wrongdoing. But for Trumpster Fire to say the thing about how, we have all these great successes, I guess he's talking about the tariffs and the, $5 million visa citizenship card that I don't think he sold one of. Sorry for the dog barking. Maybe that's somebody getting home that can call my phone for me. So I'm going to wrap this up too. Um, but dogs, quit derailing my brain, please. They're doing it on purpose. They're out to get me. For Trump to try to use all these great successes, very vague, all these great successes that I think are imaginary, in my opinion. What, like Alligator Alcatraz? That's a great success? I don't think so. Um, and passing the big barf-worthy bill, not a success, in my opinion. I don't think so. That was effing crazy. And then the floods, using that as a shield is so disgusting. Like, it's just so disgusting. And then all the things, that quote, all the things. It's like, what is he, a freaking teenager? Isn't that like teen speak? We've done this and we've done that. We've done all the things. It's kind of like a cliche. It's what he's talking in teen code, because what, he hangs out with his granddaughter Kai, and I know she's a teenager, and then Eric has 5 kids and Tiffany has some kids. So yeah, he's got a lot of grandkids, but still, that's just weird. We've got all these great successes. We've got the Texas tragedy, and we've got all the things. And you want to talk about this guy? So yeah, we want to talk about this guy because, first of all, Virginia Guiffre just got Epsteined a few months ago. 2 weeks before the Diddy trial started, to be exact, right? Exactly 2 weeks, or maybe like 2 weeks and a day. I could look up the dates. I think it was 15 days before the Diddy trial started. That just happened to be the day after, she was 41 years old. She had about 35 years of great suffering that would make a lot of people consider taking their own lives. But it seems that there's a possibility that she didn't take her own life. I mean, in my opinion, the coincidence of her doing that 2 weeks before the Diddy trial, and now the Diddy trial, I think when Trumpster Fire, I've said this a couple of times in my lives, when he made that remark in the Oval Office when a reporter questioned if he might consider pardoning Diddy if Diddy was found guilty of the charges. And he was like, yeah, I might. It depends on if I think he's treated unfairly. And, like, he used to like me a lot, and I don't know if he likes me anymore. But, a person doesn't have to like me for me to want to do favors for them. Or, I mean, he just, ugh. In my opinion, he pissed all over the trial midway through the trial that any of the witnesses that hadn't testified yet would be scared to death to then testify, have him be found guilty, and then have him be pardoned. And then, we all know that Diddy is violent. Like, his own defense team even admitted that he's violent. Okay. In their defense of him, they're like, he's just a violent guy. He's not trafficking anybody. He just likes to be violent towards his biatches. I mean, come on. Unbelievable. So, yeah, he was found guilty of transporting sex workers across state lines, which, I don't know, seems to me like that's a lot like trafficking. But who am I? Anyway, he was acquitted on the trafficking charges, and it was devastating to many of his victims and many of the people who were watching the trial. And I mean, the jurors, when the president of the United States, before the trial was even wrapped up, says that he might consider pardoning this guy if he thought he was being treated unfairly. I have an issue with the whole, like, oh, that's so unfair. I'm being treated unfairly. They're being treated unfairly. I mean, didn't we all grow up under the impression that, life isn't fair? Like, that's not a thing. Like, get over it. You know, good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. And you just got to like keep fighting and do your best and um, take it in stride and deal with the hand you're dealt and make the most of it, right? Life isn't fair. But this guy, he's like 79 years old and he's constantly complaining about how unfair things are and how he's treated so unfairly, especially by people like me, right? And the media. Probably his wives probably all treated him unfairly. I don't know. I don't know. Um, yeah, so I find it appalling, abhorrent to try to shoot down questions about a child trafficker. Little E was convicted back in 2008, give or take a year, I always say. 2007, 2008, with that whole thing with Alexander Acosta, when he was convicted of soliciting sexual favors from a sex worker that was 14 years old, but he wasn't convicted of statutory. That was insane. Like when they call it a sweetheart deal, like that's way beyond sweetheart deal. That's like an illegal deal. That's an illegal deal. There were so many victims that testified in that trial in Florida 17 years ago, 16 years ago. And he could have been sentenced up to 45 years, and he got sentenced to 13 months. And I've talked about it a couple of times, and one of those times was just yesterday, I think. His sentencing, his jail wasn't even at a jail or a prison. It was just like, I'm not sure where it was, but it was some other place that they set up for him to call it his jail. I know in Seattle they did that for the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. They rented out a corporate office for him to hang out in with all of the people that were working on his case. And he got to roam around freely in this office with the people working on his case, like the prosecutors working on his case. Like, that is some twisted crap. Anyway, that's Gary Ridgway. That's Seattle. Back to Epstein and his little cell that they made for him. I don't know if it was like a corporate office or what, but it wasn't a jail. It was not a prison. It was this other thing, because they thought he needed extra protection, and he's a rich guy and he's connected, and Acosta protected him. And even during his 13-month sentence, he only was required to be in that space that he was sentenced to for 12 hours a day. So for 12 hours a day, he was allowed to be at work. And that was a private thing. That was his own thing. Like, what do you think he was doing all day? Do you think for 13 months that he abstained from abusing people when he was used to abusing people every single day, like handfuls of people every single day? Anyway, 6 days a week, he was allowed to not be in his quote unquote cell for 12 hours. That's why they call that crap a sweetheart of a deal. So that's how he was treated in Florida. And then when the day that he lost his life in the prison, in federal prison in New York. And yeah, I did a little bit of research because I was like, is it a jail? Is it a prison? Usually people are held in jail until the trial. And then if they're sentenced, then they go to prison. But in a federal case like this, it's different. So it is kind of both a prison and it serves as a jail. So it's a federal prison where he was housed for the month of July of 2019, and then on the 10th day of August of 2019, he was allegedly found unresponsive in his cell. And to call that a self-unaliving is very convenient, very, very, very convenient. And because he was such good friends with El Presidente, who was El Presidente at the time in 2019, all the way up until January of 2021. And we all know what happened on January 6th of 2021. But also William Barr, the Attorney General at the time. I've said it a bunch of times. A lot of people have said it a bunch of times, and I don't think people are it's not talked about very much in the mainstream media. Not a lot of people are aware of William Barr's conflict of interest in working on anything Epstein, because William Barr's father, Donald Barr, hired Jeffrey Epstein for one of his first jobs as a very young adult. I think he was in his early 20s, and he had dropped out of college, and he lied and said he had a college degree and that he had some teaching certification or something like that. And William Barr's father hired him to teach at a very elite high school called Dalton High School, Dalton Preparatory School in Manhattan. And from there, he got to where he was on August 10th of 2019. And there's a lot of questions about his behavior when he was at the high school, when he was teaching these teenagers. And I mean, you look at pictures of him back then and things that are written about him when he was a teacher and how he dressed, and it was the 70s, and he was like, fur coat, pimp hat, Hawaiian shirt. I mean, strutting his stuff down the hallway like he was going to a disco. He probably did then go to the disco right after work, right? He probably took some of the students, for all we know. It's not talked about, but they try to say that he was fired, but I don't think he was fired. I think that he then got offered a job from some of the students' parents that worked on Wall Street. And when they were hiring him for that job, they found out that he didn't have his degree and that he had basically lied about qualifications. And they decided to take a chance with him anyway. And then he met Leslie, the man who's the richest man in Ohio, who's still alive to this day, who a lot of people in the know claim that little E is a protege of Les. And so Les kind of adopted him in a sense, took him under his wing, stole him from Wall Street and hired him to manage his vast wealth. And, they had houses next door to each other in New Albany, Ohio. They also had houses close to each other in Manhattan. And apparently, it's not even allegedly, but there's like tunnels that connect little E and Les's homes, both the Manhattan homes and the New Albany homes that were built. Also, the fancy mansion that Epstein lived in, that was like a 7-story townhouse that was valued at about $10 million. Les hooked him up with that for like dirt cheap, like pennies on the dollar. So So there's that. And then I don't think he was even required to pitch in any dough for the place that he lived in next door to Les in New Albany. And then, he not only managed Les's money, but he would manage any billionaires' money for them. Not millionaires. You had to have $1 billion to qualify for him to take a look at your finances and help you out. So, that's how he afforded his island and his plane and the place in New Mexico, the place in Florida that was not too far from Mar-a-Lago. Virginia Guiffre isn't the only youngster that was recruited from Mar-a-Lago. And, there's a lot of confusion about like how she got a job there and how old she was. She was 16 when she was hired at Mar-a-Lago, and she was 16 when she met Jeffrey Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell um, offered her a job. She was an attendant in I think like a ladies' locker room attendant, and she was interested in becoming a massage therapist. And Ghislaine was like, "Oh, I'll hook you up. We'll pay for your school and everything." And Virginia had been homeless. She had been abused when she was 7. I think that was a family friend that abused her when she was 7. I want to say she was horribly abused when she was 12. And the man who did that trafficked her. And then she ran away. She was born and raised in Florida. I think she went to California. That's when she was homeless, was when she escaped from being trafficked from a hotel for this douchebag. And maybe I should Google his name really quickly so that you guys know who I'm talking about. I've mentioned him before. Let me try this. Googling something on my laptop while I'm on a live. Let's see. So Epstein was not the first to traffic her. And so I Googled man who trafficked Virginia Guiffre before Epstein. And let's see. It might just be a little bit more difficult to find his name because it just wants to talk about. If I take his name out, um, so yeah, she was very young the first time she was trafficked. 12 years old, allegedly. But yeah, it just wants to keep talking about Epstein, of course. Um, I'll find his name and I'll put it um, in the description. Yeah, that's annoying. Oh, you know why it is? I think, let me try this. I'm going to go ahead and try it again. I'm going to do a Google A search because that was a Yahoo search. And I'm telling you, Yahoo is not a good search engine in my experience. So I'm going to put the same thing in this one and see if it tells me more. And it might not. I have it in my notes somewhere too. Because his name is a familiar name. And I don't know if he was prosecuted. But anyway, I'm going to go back to my screen of my live and I'm going to sign off. Um, still wanting to keep the focus on prayers for the little kids and the families and everybody who's suffering in these natural disasters that are just beyond comprehension. And thank goodness for the help, the first responders and people who donate. And yeah, they've got to like up their game and be transparent about how things went down in Kerr County, Kerrville, at the Mystic Camp. So devastating, so devastating. It's just beyond devastating, really. I mean, there's just no words. So I think it's really important to keep talking about Epstein and holding the person that is in the White House accountable for all of his crap and shenanigans and mayhem and lies, and all of the people around him, Bongino and Patel and Caroline with a K and Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem and all the rest of those MFs. They'll get theirs. So it's very, very sad that things have gotten to the point that they're at, and especially if the election was actually stolen, like I have believed since the election day that it was by illegal means. I mean, even if you just look at the 270 plus million that Elon donated to the Trumpster Fire, like, how is any of that legal? Like, it really wasn't. But then some Pennsylvania judge said, okay, sure. When they were like offering people $100 or $1 million prize to register to vote and all that crap, that was crazy, man. That was some serious crap. But then, the admissions of like the how Elon's really good at knowing those vote counting machines, and things that Putin has said, like, yeah, Donnie, you owe me, and things Donnie has said, like, oh, I've got a secret. I'm not going to tell you guys, but I've got a secret. Like, it's very bizarre. It's all very bizarre. And it's my opinion that these people, like Peter Thiel, is just one of many, but he's one of the names that I'm more familiar with, that a lot of people are more familiar with. They are the billionaire masterminds behind the scenes running the show. And then we've got people like Trumpster Fire. They're really, I guess, just puppets. But I mean, he's an odd one because he's kind of like Chucky. He's like a puppet with a mind of his own, huh? I mean, it's scary. It's not funny. It's scary. It's just like laugh or cry. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Peace out. Thanks for being here. Love and light. And what else? Eat your protein. Stay hydrated. Eat your veggies. And we'll try to get on much earlier tomorrow before the brain rot sets in, and with the cell phone so I can use my crutch the way I like to. Oh, and one more thing. One more thing. I am moving my set into the next room. So things are not going to stay like this for long, but I'm not sure when I'll be making the transition. I already have like half of the studio moved into the larger new studio that is my old studio. So I'm keeping the set intact, but I got the rest of everything moved. But then once I make that transition, you'll notice right away, because I'll probably do a couple of lives in here without any of the stuff. and I might do a couple of lives in there without any of this stuff. It's going to be interesting, but hopefully I'll make it better. That's always the goal when there's change. You can make things better. All right. Love and light. Have a great night.